The hum of the refrigerator was my only company. It was a Tuesday, and the silence in my two-bedroom suburban house felt less like peace and more like a held breath. My husband, David, was in Cincinnati for a 3-day logistics conference, and our son, Ethan, was away at his first year of college. The empty nest, a phrase I'd heard so often, wasn't a nest at all. It was a perfectly clean, utterly still museum dedicated to a family that used to live here. I was the lone curator, dusting memories. The problem was the dining room chandelier, a fussy, brass thing the previous owners had installed. It had begun to flicker with a spiteful, erratic rhythm the night David left. At first, it was a minor annoyance, but by the next afternoon, it had given up entirely, casting the formal room where we never ate into a deep gloom. David, ever practical, had scheduled an electrician from his phone before his flight even took off. Ray from Power Plus, he'd texted. Thursday, 9 a.m. Just be there to let him in. But the flickering got worse, spreading a nervous energy through the house. A light in the hallway would stutter. The overhead in the kitchen gave a disconcerting pop. It felt like the house itself was having a panic attack. I called the company, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet, and they said Ray could come a day early, this Wednesday afternoon. Relief, then a swift, unfamiliar spike of something else. Anxiety about a repairman. It was silly. I was a 47-year-old woman, a former school librarian, not a character in a paperback thriller. At exactly 1 p.m., a plain white van with a tasteful blue lightning bolt logo pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as a man got out. He was tall, with broad shoulders strained against a dark blue work shirt, and hair more silver than blonde, cut short. He moved with a deliberate, unruffled ease, collecting a heavy toolbox from the back. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. There was a weathered competence about him, like a well-used tool. I opened the door before he could knock. "You must be Ray," I said, smoothing my sweater. "Yes, Mum." "Mrs. Miller?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. "Claire, please, call me Claire." Mum made me feel 100 years old. He gave a small, professional nod. "Claire." The call said a faulty chandelier. I led him to the dining room, conscious of the vacuum lines on the carpet, the perfect order of everything. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes went straight to the ceiling, then to the walls, tracing invisible lines. "Mind if I check your panel first?" he asked. Sometimes a localized fault is a symptom of a deeper hunger. A deeper hunger. The phrase stuck with me as I showed him to the basement door. I waited in the kitchen, listening to the solid, muffled thuds of his work boots below. My house, for the first time in days, contained another human sound. It didn't feel like an intrusion, it felt like a resonance. He came back up, his expression thoughtful. "Panel's fine. Good, actually. Older, but solid. Let's look at this fixture." He set up his ladder under the chandelier. I lingered in the doorway, unsure if I should stay or go, feeling oddly superfluous in my own home. "So, you live here alone?" he asked, not looking down as he unscrewed the first bulb. "Oh, no. My husband, David, is traveling. My son's at college. U of M. "Ah," he said. Quiet, then, very. He worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the gentle clink of metal and his quiet breathing. I was about to slip away to pretend to be busy when he spoke again. "You know, this wiring, it's a mess. Someone did a hack job here. See this?" He held down a twisted pair of wires, their insulation cracked and brittle. "This isn't just a burnt-out connection. This is a fire waiting for a place to happen." A chill went through me. "A fire?" "Yes, Mum. Claire, I'm going to need to disconnect this entirely for now. It's not safe. I can quote you for a full rewire of the fixture, proper junction box, the works. Or you can just leave it disconnected until you decide." The definitive, unassailable certainty in his voice was like a rock in the stream of my vague unease. Here was a problem that could be seen, touched, and fixed. It was tangible. Unlike the quiet, which was just absence. "Do it," I heard myself say. "Fix it properly, please." He smiled for the first time then, a brief, transformative flash that crinkled the corners of his blue eyes. "Good call." As he worked, he began to talk. Not idle chatter, but little observations. He pointed out how the house's original wiring, knob and tube probably, had been patched over with newer cable in a clumsy, dangerous way. "It's like the house has two hearts," he mused, his arms deep in the ceiling. "An old, tired one, and a new one that's been grafted on poorly. They are beating out of rhythm." I found myself pulling a chair from the kitchen and sitting just outside the dining room, listening. I asked questions. What did knob and tube look like? Why was copper better than aluminum? He answered patiently, explaining the logic of circuits, the importance of grounding. "It's about giving the current a safe path home," he said. Otherwise, it finds its own path through your walls, through you. His knowledge was physical, earned. It was about the hidden veins of the house, the lifeblood of current flowing behind the drywall. My world, David's world, was made of spreadsheets, conference calls, strategic planning. It was abstract, existing in emails and projections. This was different. This was cause and effect. A loose wire caused a fire. A proper ground prevented a shock. It had a profound, moral clarity. What did you do before? I asked during a lull, as he was spooling out new, sheathed cable. Before being an electrician, he descended the ladder to cut the cable. He was closer to me now. I could smell a clean scent of soap and, faintly, of ozone and warm metal. Marine Corps, 20 years. Electrician's mate. Kept the lights on a floating city made of steel. He said it plainly, without pride or nostalgia, just fact. This, he gestured with his wire strippers, is a lot quieter. No ships in suburban Michigan. That, he said with another small smile, was the point. David had gone straight from business school to a management trainee program. The hardest physical thing he'd ever done was a corporate triathlon. Ray's hands were etched with fine scars and calluses, a map of practical labor. I looked down at my own hands, soft from lotion, their only function these days to tap keys, turn pages, and wipe dust from surfaces. The repair took most of the afternoon. He moved from the dining room to the hallway, then to the kitchen light, finding and fixing the shaky connections that had caused the flickering. He didn't just fix the reported problem, he diagnosed the system. With every new switch he secured, every wire nut he twisted, the house felt steadier. The anxious, flickering energy was being calmed, brought under the control of a competent, quiet intelligence. I made us both coffee. He accepted it with a grateful nod, taking a careful sip while examining the newly installed junction box. You're good at this, I said, leaning against the doorframe. It's just following the path, he said. Electricity wants to flow. Your job is just to give it a good, safe highway to travel on. Most problems come from people forcing it down bad roads or trying to block it where it naturally wants to go. It sounded like philosophy, like life advice. Give it a good, safe highway. Had I ever done that for myself? My passions, my own current. I'd been a librarian because I loved stories, the connection of them. But I'd quit when Ethan was born, a decision that made perfect, logical sense at the time. And somehow, I never found the highway back. My energy had been rerouted into carpool lanes and PTA meetings, then into maintaining a home for two men who were gradually leaving it. It was nearing 5 p.m. when he finished, testing every switch and outlet with a little device that beeped reassuringly. The house was flooded with a bright, unwavering light. It felt clean and safe. All done, Ray said, packing his tools with the same methodical care he'd used all day. The heart's beating in rhythm now. He handed me the invoice. It was fair, itemized, clear. As I went to get my checkbook, he wandered into the living room, stopping by the crowded bookshelf. His eyes scanned the titles. You're a reader, he said. Used to be. More of a rereader now, I guess. My favorites were all old friends, Austen, Fitzgerald, Morrison. He pointed to a worn copy of East of Eden. That's a king of a book. You've read it. On a lot of long deployments. Timshall. Thou mayest. He said the word slowly, with weight. The idea that you always have a choice, that's powerful wiring. I stared at him, this electrician who fixed faulty hearts in houses and quoted Steinbeck. Something melted and then reformed inside me, a connection snapping into place with an almost audible click. It wasn't romantic, not in the way I'd ever understood it. It was recognition. Here was a man who understood currents, both the kind that lit up rooms and the kind that lit up minds. David saw my books as data, a sign of being cultured. Ray saw them as tools, as vital components of a person's inner circuitry. I wrote the check with a hand that trembled slightly. As I handed it to him, our fingers brushed. A simple, mundane contact. But in the newly illuminated silence of my house, it felt like a completed circuit. A tiny, harmless, but undeniable arc of energy. Thank you, Ray. You saved me from a house fire and gave me a philosophy lesson. He chuckled, a warm, low sound. Just another day on the job, Claire. You take care of yourself and your house. It's a good one. It just needed some attention to its bones. He left then, with a final, solid nod. I watched the white van back out and disappear down the tree-lined street. The profound quiet rushed back in, but it was different now. It wasn't an empty silence, it was a charged one, like the moment after a symphony ends, the air still vibrating with the memory of sound. I didn't move from the doorway for a long time. I replayed the afternoon. The certainty in his hands, the calm in his voice, the way he saw systems, paths, the hidden logic of things. And that word, Timshel, thou mayest. I walked back into the dining room and looked up at the chandelier. It shone with a clear, brilliant, and unwavering light. He had fixed it, but he had illuminated something else entirely. The following days were ordinary on the surface. David returned, full of stories about synergies and leveraged assets. I cooked dinner, we watched a series, we talked about Ethan's latest news. But underneath, a fundamental switch had been flipped. The flickering inside me had stopped. A steady, determined current had begun to flow. I started small. I went into the town library, not just to drop off books, but to ask if they needed volunteers for their adult literacy program. They did. I began on Tuesday afternoons, sitting with adults, their hands rougher than mine, their eyes nervous, helping them trace the pathways of letters into words, words into stories. The joy in their faces when a sentence clicked into place, it was like watching a dark room flood with light. I cleaned out the spare room, Ethan's old room, not with sadness, but with purpose. I sold the old gaming chair and the teen posters. With the money, I bought a simple desk and a good lamp. I didn't know what I would do there yet, but I knew it was my junction box. One evening, as David and I sat in the living room, he glanced over. The lights are so much better. That electrician did a good job. He did, I agreed, looking up from my book, a new one, by a living author I'd never tried before. He said the house had two hearts beating out of rhythm. He fixed the wiring so they could beat as one. David nodded absently, already scrolling on his tablet. Good metaphor. He didn't ask what the two hearts were. He didn't need to. But I knew. One heart was the past, the family life that had pulsed so vividly here. The other was my own, a quiet, steady thing that had been forced to follow someone else's rhythm for too long. The electrician came while I was alone, and he did more than rewire a faulty fixture. He showed me the dangerous, flickering mess of my own neglected pathways. He gave me the tools, not physical ones, but the idea of them: safety, grounding, a good highway for my own current. I am no longer just the curator of a museum. I am its engineer. I am tracing my own lines, installing my own switches, building a room of my own within these familiar walls. The work is slow, and sometimes I feel like I'm working without a blueprint. But I remember his lesson: you don't block the current where it wants to go. You give it a safe path home. And